I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Kuwait to introduce an address by the head of government.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, distinguished delegates, it is my honor to introduce a recorded statement by His Excellency Sheikh Sabah Khaled Al-Hamad Al-Sabah, the Prime Minister of the State of Kuwait, to the 75th session of the General Assembly of the United Nations. Thank you.
In the name of God, most merciful, most compassionate. Mr. Volker Busker, the President of the General Assembly of the United Nations, Your Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, the United Nations Secretary General, Your Highness, Excellencies, Heads of Delegation, ladies and gentlemen. Peace be upon you. At the outset, it gives me pleasure to congratulate Your Excellency on your election as President of the 75th session of the United Nations General Assembly. And I do assure you of our full support for you to discharge your tasks and to shoulder your responsibilities. Also, I would like to take this opportunity to express our sincere appreciation for the outstanding efforts made by your predecessor, His Excellency, Mr. Tijani Mohammed Bandi, during his presidency of the previous session. Mr. President, the 75th session of the General Assembly is held under unprecedented, compelling circumstances when the world is relentlessly overwhelmed by risks and threats that undermine all manifestations of modern life. It is a calamity that toured the globe without borders or warning, an evil omen shrieking death and morbidity. It recognizes no borders and none of the ethnic, political, and social determinants shaped and founded by human historical experience. COVID-19 brought misery and war on its tails, leaving the bereft with wrenched hearts and the infected in distress. This behooved on us to extend our heartfelt condolences to all peoples and states given the momentous calamity. We pray to the Almighty, who praises the patient and forbearing at the time of hardship, to bestow His mercy on the souls of the deceased and to the speedy recovery of the infected and deliver humanity from this ordeal. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, the grave damage inflicted by the pandemic on the various vital and basic aspects of everyday life makes it a landmark, marked by terrifying upsurge in the number of victims to about 960,000 deaths, 30 million documented cases. In addition to the hardest recession yet hitting the world since the aftermath of World War II, coupled with the lowest revenues ever since 1870 and the increasing risk of 100 million people falling into abject poverty. All this has revealed to the world the importance of bolstering the existing economic, health, social, and environmental systems. The viability of multilateralism has been thus put to the test. In this regard, we highly value the extraordinary and significant roles undertaken by the United Nations and its Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, thus harnessing all means and measures to address this pandemic through accelerating action to provide universal access to vaccines and diagnostic and therapeutic tools, with top priority given to the most vulnerable groups, namely women, children, and the elderly. Countries and societies that suffer from armed conflict-induced humanitarian and refugee crises have always been a preoccupation for this long-standing organization, as the Secretary General called for silencing the guns in a global ceasefire on March 23, 2020. He announced it as an opportunity to address the root causes of conflict and to allow for tireless efforts to defeat the malady of war and to close ranks in our global fight against this pandemic, while focusing on recovery in all its phases from the destructive consequences thereof, to build a more equitable world where the long-desired link between education and the labor market is forged, where sustainable development and social protection are enjoyed by all, and where universal healthcare systems are improved, a world where the role of women is promoted and gender equality is upheld. This is the true manifestation of the purposes for which the United Nations was founded, which maintaining international peace and security and sparing future generations the scourge of war. Mr. President, the world continues to suffer the repercussions of COVID-19. Meanwhile, it anticipates with anxiety a solution thereto, be it a certified vaccine or approved treatment. This will deliver the world from the dilemma of this international crisis and bring to a halt the spiral of deterioration and restore hope to mankind for resuming their usual way of life, and will dispel the feelings of panic and trepidation that have debilitated them at the outset of this year. This begs our pondering over the situation in a number of regions of the world, as this pandemic has contributed to the aggravation of the crises endured thereby and increased the burden of the challenges faced by their people. And unfortunately, our Arab and Middle East region was among the hardest hit regions by this pandemic, despite the availability of written solutions and prescribed remedies found in the endless terms of references and Security Council and General Assembly resolutions. However, the chronic, long-standing challenge inherent in implementation and serious and earnest implementation thereof and of the provisions of these resolutions has remained an insurmountable obstacle to moving forward and achieving the desired progress. The state of Kuwait, in supporting the efforts of the international community to respond to this pandemic, has contributed $290 million, stressing her commitment to cooperate in support of international efforts to accelerate the process of manufacturing the vaccine and making it equitably available for the countries most in need. Kuwait also announced its readiness to host critical cases of UN personnel infected with the COVID-19 virus while working in the field in Central and West Asia to receive medical care in Kuwaiti hospitals. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, the Palestinian question continues to occupy a central and historic position in our Arab and Islamic worlds. We stress our principled, firm and unwavering position in supporting the choices of the Palestinian people to obtain their legitimate rights. Meanwhile, efforts should continue to resume negotiations within a specific timeline to reach just and comprehensive peace according to the terms of reference of the peace process, international legitimacy resolutions, and the Arab Peace Initiative. The Israeli occupation should come to an end, and the independent state of Palestine should be established with East Jerusalem as its capital on the pre-June 4, 1967 borders. In this regard, we do value all international efforts made to resolve this key issue. Mr. President, the ongoing crisis in sisterly Yemen and the serious threats it poses to regional security and stability indicates the reality of how relevant Security Council resolutions are received and acted upon. It is important to uphold the Stockholm Agreement. In this regard, we reaffirm our position that the political solution is the only solution to this crisis, which should be based on the three terms of reference agreed on, namely the Gulf Initiative and its executive mechanism, the outcomes of the Yemeni National Dialogue Conference, and Security Council resolutions, especially Resolution 2216. We do reiterate our support for all efforts made by the Secretary General's Special Envoy to Yemen, aimed at resuming the political process to reach a political solution that could bring an end to this crisis. We call on all parties to positively engage in this process and to agree to the proposals made. At the same time, we do welcome the constructive roles played by the brotherly Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to start the implementation of the Riyadh Agreement. Meanwhile, we renew our condemnation of all attacks on Saudi territories, thus reaffirming our support to all measures taken by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to maintain its security and stability. We also urge for rapid action to be taken regarding the oil tanker Safer to avert an imminent environmental catastrophe. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, the developments of the Syrian crisis, which has entered its 10th year with all the human suffering it entails, stand as true witness to the loss of international consensus and the increased foreign interventions that was a major reason for prolonging this belligerent conflict. We do appreciate the resumption by the Constitutional Committee of its work, and as its third round of talks was convened in Geneva last August, and we do look forward to its continuing its work towards realizing the hopes and aspirations of our Syrian brothers and sisters by reaching a political settlement in accordance with relevant Security Council resolutions, especially Resolution 2254 and the 2012 Geneva Communique, stressing our position that there is no military solution for this tragedy. Only negotiations is the only way out of this plight, and we do commend and value the efforts of the UN Secretary General Special Envoy to Syria. Mr. President, there's another issue concerning our Arab region, namely Libya, especially the severe constitutional divide that is witnessed in Libya for over 6 years, a matter that has its repercussions in the country and the region. And we do urge all Libyan parties to exercise restraint and to allow for peaceful solutions based on dialogue to take precedence over violence. In this context, we do welcome the positive results achieved during the dialogue sessions between the delegations of the Parliament and the Supreme Council of State through reaching to draw a roadmap to unify the state sovereign institutions according to the Security Council resolutions, including Resolution 2510, and the outcomes of relevant regional and international conferences. We do commend the hosting by the Kingdom of Morocco of the recent sessions, and we hope that these efforts will culminate into a comprehensive political settlement that would guarantee the security, stability, and unity of Libya and also meet the aspirations of the Libyan people. Mr. President, one of the principles of good neighborliness as per the United Nations Charter, and in upholding these principles, we do appeal and urge the Islamic Republic of Iran to take serious measures towards confidence building, to commence dialogue built on respect for the sovereignty of states, non-interference in their internal affairs, and to ease the tensions in the Gulf, and to base our relations on reciprocity and reciprocal respect for a region that enjoys security, prosperity, and development. And we call upon Iran to cooperate with the international community to ease the tensions and the escalation for de-escalation in the region. Mr. President, terrorism and violent extremism constitute one of the most dangerous challenges to the world order. The Middle East region in particular has suffered from an upsurge in subversive operations at the hands of terrorist organizations, especially Daesh or ISIL, which took Islam as a pretext or as a cover, false cover. And this begs us to intensify efforts to combat and to fight this real threat in all its forms, and to give impetus to all relevant international and regional agreements to counter terrorism. And given the exacerbating effects of this danger in our region, including Yemen, Libya, Syria, Somalia, and Afghanistan, Iraq's experience has been recorded as one of the most important experiments in combating Daesh in collaboration with the international community, the Security Council, and the Iraqi government, and it has a very tangible impact on clearing the Iraqi territories from the from this terrorist entity. And we do stress the importance of continuing the support to the efforts of the Iraqi government for the reconstruction and enforcement of stability on its territories. In this context, we also express our satisfaction with the results of the Afghani peace talks that have been hosted by the state of Qatar. And in this regard, we would like to praise the role and efforts of Qatar in this regard. And we do also convey our appreciation for the responsible spirit shown by the participating Afghan parties to achieve the desired peace and security. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, the adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals illustrates the loftiest human plan striving for a better future. And this is a culmination of the human effort aspiring to achieve the Millennium Development Goals with people at the center thereof. This is an opportunity to recall that the fulfillment of international obligations and solidarity at the global level will represent the real starting point for accomplishing those goals, aiming to eradicate poverty in all its forms and to ensure that all humans will enjoy equal rights of dignity, education, health, political participation, in addition to the empowerment of youth and women, and addressing the impacts of climate change within the framework of the Paris Agreement, as the ongoing environmental degradation is one of the biggest obstacles to realizing these goals, according to the principle of shared responsibility, taking into account the difference in responsibilities and burden bearings. Although the United Nations announced in January 2020 that this decade will be the decade of action to accelerate the implementation of this plan, the effects and repercussions of the pandemic created a lot of difficulties before this approach. Sustainable development is conditional upon activating multilateral international action and raising global cooperation and solidarity according to the rule of common destiny, by restoring balance in financial and trade systems and effectively providing vital global public goods, guided by sustainability standards in taking decisions while bearing in mind the circumstances and conditions in developing countries. In conclusion, I renew our upholding of multilateralism and the principles and purposes of the UN Charter, which promotes international governance to fulfill its noble mission of maintaining international peace and security and serving all humanity, and peace be upon you.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister of the State of Kuwait for the statement just made. I now give the